Lively and unrehearsed, it's our weekly discussion we call Moral Side of the News, and we're glad you're here. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me is the distinguished panel this week, Rabbi Gaylia Rooks, the Temple, Reverend Harriett Akins Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church in New Albany, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, and Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. Our first topic: Metro Louisville is considering a pilot proposal from the University of Louisville to have service providers other than police respond to some 911 calls. The idea: arrange it so the first response to a behavioral health crisis or other emergency comes from a mental health therapist, social worker, substance abuse counselor, or others rather than a police officer. A program like this is already being used in Eugene, Oregon. So now let's turn to our panel on Moral Side of the News, and let's get your first reaction to this new idea, this proposal.
I say bravo. It sounds, even though it's novel, but it sounds like it has a merit to it for that reason. I, for one, have had some traffic encounters calls. The police came out for a non-violent call, and one situation became violent because they responded. Oftentimes, if you have someone who is better suited to a mental health issue, they can respond more effectively. And to say that many call the police only have one weapon, one tool in the toolbox, which is escalated level of force. And just like the old adage, if the tool you have is a hammer, then every solution requires a hammer, even though a saw or a screwdriver or, et cetera, tool might be a better fit to solve the task. So I think it's novel. I'm encouraged by it. It came as a result of a couple things. This top to bottom review, and of course some of the claims that were made during the season of the Breonna protest. Look at other ways to deflect the call to an area or redirect the call to an area that can better serve the crisis. So I think it's a great idea.
I agree with you that it's a great idea, but what I find, the one element I found missing that kept running through my mind as I read the article was, where is the element of community involvement and voice, and where is the element of trust and how will that be developed as part of this plan? If we want to use other tools in the toolbox, how do we make it so that people would want to respond to that in a way that would be helpful?
The task force, I can't remember what it was called, that the mayor put together to look into a global police reform for our Metro Police here in Louisville. I think that there were over 100 points, and it was, I don't know anything about these kinds of things, but to me, it looked very comprehensive. All these different sections about how not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, and training officers in de-escalation and more training. But regarding what you were talking about, community voices and listening, and there was a whole section on that that talked about everything from getting community leaders involved in the training and the program to having incentives for officers who are really fulfilling that requirement of connecting and improving relations with communities. I'm sure that it's not going to be implemented 100% the way it was recommended, but to me, on paper, it looked like a fabulous start. Like they really, if they do, the things that they suggested, if they are indeed implemented, I think it will make a huge difference in demilitarizing the police. Because
that's a good word used.
I'm sorry?
That's an excellent term. Demilitarize. I like that term because that is far too often is a response. It's a militaristic response.
Right.
that is not always the best.
And in the face of increased, this whole thing getting out of control, and of course we understand why, and the systemic racism that's involved in it, but the police, not just here, but across the country, their response has been bigger and more powerful weapons and more arms and literally military grade tanks and personnel carriers and things like that, that really just the presence of those things, regardless of how they're used, just their perception escalates and puts people in a warlike frame of mind. And so if instead of throwing all that money into weapons of war, if we could put money into better training for the police, and then this idea, like they've been doing this in Oregon for a number of years, is my understanding, and they've had some good success with it. I mean, sometimes you need a police officer, that's what you need. But sometimes, if you had a social worker or a addiction drug counselor or a marriage counselor or someone who could come and know how to verbally and physically de-escalate the situation.
I would concur with what people have been saying, that it's a good idea. I like it on paper, Gaylia, as you say. But I, being the individual who questions quite often, particulars especially, I would urge caution in regards to implementation, because what we're saying here is we really don't know how it would be implemented, first off. But if you look at Oregon's record, whatever like that, you go online and check out the Eugene Police Department Crime Analysis Unit, which looks at all this stuff. What looks good on paper may not be realized in real life, in the sense of we all know, hopefully we know, if you've dealt with police in the past, that in a blink of an eye, someone who is in a situation that you might have a psychologist, a therapist there with them, in a blink of an eye, it can become a shooting match, which armed police are needed. I don't know if I agree totally with Clay in regards to that's the only weapon they have, but it is a weapon they have. And if you look at the percentage of cases in which this has been applied, you get like 2 to 8%. Okay, well, what happens to the rest of the cases that are called? Not every call coming in is you need an armed policeman there, but at the same time, not every call coming in is one that you don't need an armed policeman there. There has to be that situation there where there's an ease for the safety of all involved, including those who make the call. So I would just say caution. Money-wise as well, that's a big issue. We're saying, as information, John, you sent us, what's that, U of L is getting like $250,000 or so just about to implement this. Well, that's a drop in the bucket. If you look at Oregon, they're up to $750,000 to $1 million a year in this regard. So that's another $1 million that the city has to come up with, where they're going to come up with it, taking it away from other. It's interesting in our line of work in church. When we look at budget, they'll say, well, if we just did away with this, we could implement that. The problem is this doesn't cover that. I mean, you can take away take away pennies, and you still need dollars elsewhere. So I'm in favor of looking at it, certainly. And yes, I'm one of the ones who would say we need to cut back on death by police, et cetera. Absolutely. And the racism is there. Yes, I acknowledge that. But I would should offer just a word of caution that we implement this, because we don't know really how it's going to pan out. We are not Eugene, Oregon, here in Louisville, Kentucky. And if you look at San Francisco and other places that are looking at this as well, they have to take into consideration the locality of who the population they're dealing with. And so I'd just say, yes, let's proceed, I would say. But again, be aware, number one, we're going to have to pay for it. Number two, we're going to have to really, I don't know how you're going to say, shade it into the way of life here in the Louisville area.
Well, I mean, just to answer your question, just not to get ahead of ourselves, they're not ready to implement this just yet. I think
correct.
There's going to be some study, and part of this forfeiture fund that's already paid for because of forfeited funds, so it's not going to cost anything to do it. So there's no risk there yet.
Well, okay, that's a minimum amount.
I'm saying just to start off now. So there's really no risk starting off and exploring this this 4.5-month study kind of phase to kind of sort out what it is. So they're not ready to implement it today. I think that the implementation really is months away after you get into this contract and be able to compile the data and do some things like that. So I think that it's worth at least looking into it. It has minimum risk to start, and more to gain. So I think at this point, I think it has more merit than risk at this particular point. 3 months down the road, it's a different story. I think we'll have more data. More.
But it also shows. Oh, sorry. It also shows us the backstory that 911 has been used as the only resource people felt they had to use to call when they had situations in which maybe armed force is not needed, but they had no other choice, or they didn't think they had other options. So I think this is a brilliant idea, but I think it also opens up Pandora's box to show us where those other services are lacking within the community. And how do we then connect people so that the 911 number becomes less the go-to, and these services that are so needed and we want to be in the hands of the people, how do we navigate that? And I hope that will be part of the fallout.
That's part of the education. We've educated our people to the extent that 911 is an automatic response. But to your point, Harriet, I think we do need some, as we would say, catechesis in regards to training the folks to say, okay, why, who am I calling in this situation? And maybe there's other places have tried different numbers for the police, et cetera.
Well, the city actually has this. Excuse me. The city does have another number. They have City Call, and it already functions like that. So City Call is one call number that diverts you out having retired from a public utility. They can divert funds to a MSD, for example, or the sanitation of the department. So City Call functions like that already. Even though it's not a 911 call, but it is one call that kind of diverts the call to the services that better meets the need of the caller. So so there's
Clay. The point is how many people know that number as opposed to 911.
Well, that's true.
I wanted to get back to Tony's point about the money, because you're right. This is a drop in the bucket, and we've all seen how, we'll take the pennies from here to try to cover the dollars or hundreds of dollars over there. But I mean, what price would you put on a human life? And even if it's not death, the loss of a human life, saving a human life, someone who's been involved in drugs or alcohol or spouse abuse, things like that. I really feel that, there's no amount of money that's too much to spend to really make a difference and change people's lives. So that's the dreamer side. The practical side says, where are you going to come up with that money? And I understand it. But if we really, really believe it's important, then we'll find it. We'll prioritize.
But if I may, Gaylia, from a moral perspective, we put a price on human life every day.
I know we do.
And so that's the reality. Yeah.
Well, we're trying to move beyond that.
Gotcha.
And we do have a price. Speaking of mistakes made by the police department, there's a price for that. Mm-hmm. We had last year famously a $12 million price tag for a police mistake. And they make payments like that all the time that we don't really hear that much about. But police mistakes do cost real dollars. So you could do a cost benefit analysis on what it costs when they make the wrong call very easily. So I think it's at least worth consideration, because it does not only cost human life, but it does cost real dollars when the wrong call is made.
Right. I've been trained by the Jesuits, which frightens some people. But one of the first lessons the Jesuits will teach you is that time is not linear. Time is cyclical. And in my seventh decade already, if you look at the way things cycle around, we're going through cycles that we've gone through before in human society in different places. And that comes to bear too, Clay, in the sense of, yes, you look at the negative cost versus the positive cost. But as Gaylia is trying to say, I agree with you, Gaylia, it should not be a balance out of who comes out the more, and that's what we do. We should always strive for the better part. But again, you mentioned that to someone who is barely making it through the COVID-19 routine and say, now we're going to have to increase your taxes in order to do this. That presents a major issue. The whole taxation problem too presents a moral issue. But I agree with you, Clay. I'm saying I agree with everyone that you said here. It's a good idea. Let's pursue it. But I would just again say, let's do it cautiously.
And yes, Clay is right. There's 311 Metro call, but Metro United Way also has 211, which is a social services line. And they always say, if you have a burning house, call 911. If you have a burning question, call 211. So that service is out there as well.
Never heard that.
If you have a burning field, call 311.
211. All right, our second topic on our program.
Metro United Way is 211.
211.
And if you need help with something else.
Social services, maybe some support, especially now in the middle of the pandemic. It's worth a call. 211. All right, our second topic. If a U.S. senator from Kentucky doesn't finish their term, current law allows the governor to choose anyone to fill that role, and it doesn't matter which party they represent. State Senate President Robert Stivers wants to change that. His proposal would require the governor to pick someone from the same political party as the departing senator. Senator Mitch McConnell backs this plan, and a handful of states require their governors to do this now. So turning back to our panel on Moral Side of the News, what do you think of this proposed change by Senate President Stivers?
I always smell something whenever Mitch McConnell endorses it. I mean, it just has an odor that is undeniable. He's been through many cycles before in his 36 years of serving, and this is the first time this issue is coming up. So I'm always suspicious when a procedure change comes. It has merit. I understand it. I thought it was in policy already, to be honest with you. I know that's true with board appointments. So we have a situation similar with board appointments to state universities. You have to have a certain mix of parties represented on certain boards, especially with universities. Of certain parties. So that already exists with that respect there, and certain racial makeups as well. But the political piece is already in place in the board appointment process. So I thought it was already in place, to be honest with you, for replacing persons such as senators and the like. On its surface, normally you would think it would sound, it does have merit if you're just looking at it purely without the taint of political motivation. But here again is yet another occasion where they're trying to reduce the power of the governor that already has the power. And there appears to be a lot of that going on right now in the state of Kentucky.
It indicates to me a lack of the so-called search for unity. They're individuals who hold all public office. Why are they in public office? My understanding would be that they're there to serve the people. But we've had individuals in Frankfort and on the federal level who have admitted they are there to get reelected, and that's problematic. But just another point, if I may, I went online to look at the Kentucky Constitution, because I don't know what this law, the import of this, even if the law were changed, because the Constitution of the state of Kentucky indicates that the governor will choose, at least could be interpreted, it doesn't say federal, but the governor by Constitution has the obligation and the right to choose who they will choose on the state level. But I don't know what is the authority of this law that they want. Are they talking, is it on the federal level? Is that still governed by the Kentucky Constitution? If it is, then he's looking for a constitutional change, which may be problematic from whoever holds the office. Anyway, that's my comment.
Well, when I first read this, my first thought was, like you, Clay, wasn't that already a thing? My second thought was, even if it's a good thing to change, which I'm not saying it is, why are they doing that now? There is so many problems facing the Commonwealth of Kentucky and the United States of America. Why this? Why are we even spending time talking about it ourselves now? Of all the things that are important going on, and of all the things that could make a real difference in Frankfort for the rest of the Commonwealth, really, this is what we should be putting our energy towards? And like you, Tony, I was thinking, so much for unity. And if you could convince me that this really is an important and good thing to do, I would still say, I don't know how long, some people would say since the Civil War, our country has never been this divided. The fewer laws that you can make that cater to partyism rather than patriotism, the better. This is not the time. And of course, that makes you wonder, why are they doing this? They're trying to limit and limit and limit what Andy Beshear can do. I mean, he has proven to be a very, very effective leader during this very challenging time for Kentucky. And not everyone would agree with that, I'm sure. And this divisiveness between the liberals and the conservatives and the more conservative conservatives and the more liberal liberals, we're slicing our country more and more. There's the progressives and the liberals and the Democrats and the Republicans and the far right Republicans and the Lincoln Party and the, I would say, neo-Nazis. And, it just keeps, it's just, now is not the time. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think timing is everything, Gaylia. I think you can see the breadcrumbs. You can connect the dots. Of course, Mitch McConnell has never been this old before in his tenure. So you have the reality of that mortality that he is facing, no doubt. They're trying to ensure, particularly the Republican Party, is trying to ensure and shore up their power by any means necessary. So this is yet a step in that direction. And this term unity is never something that is introduced on the so-called right. It's always, unity is a left term. You don't hear unity mentioned by no one on the right unless it benefits their cause.
Right. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Or they're complaining that the left isn't doing it.
Right. That's the only time that word comes up.
It's exhausting. I'm just tired of the infighting that is presented to us through the media sources. I expect more from people who are elected, and maybe that's a bit Pollyannish, but to beat up on a governor who has, and I'm living on the other side of the river and watching, and to see him work so diligently and how low the numbers were at the beginning of COVID, because he stressed that. And I live in a state that did not do that well. It's embarrassing how it's been handled in my opinion, on this sunny side of the river. So to see this infighting without outward looking toward the great needs of the people right now is so upsetting.
We have about 5 minutes left on our program, Moral Side of the News, and let's change the COVID-19, change the pandemic, and talk about Governor Andy Beshear. He announced that Kentucky will be getting a 29% increase in vaccine supplies starting next week. So, panel, I know some of you have been vaccinated, some of you haven't. I have not. Your thoughts on an increasing in the vaccine and more people getting it? It's good news.
Yes.
Great news. It's great news. I'm more than a year. I am not even 65, so I'm waiting my turn.
Really young
trying
girl.
to be very. I know it's like it's the only time that youth has been punishing. So I am, trying to wait my turn, but I am really going stir crazy. It's hard, but. As I said before, I think that Governor Beshear is doing a fabulous job and trying his best. And I know, like, Tony, aren't you half vaccinated?
People call me half a lot of things. Yes, I'm half vaccinated.
I'm half.
Claire, you one who said you were half vaccinated?
I'm half. I'll be whole next weekend, but I'm half today.
So only half of you can go out of the bubble, right?
Yeah,
there you go. Right. I applaud the amount coming in, because there's still, in my experience of people in different churches and whatever, there's still a good number of people who just say, I will not do that. One of the persons said to me recently, did you get that? He said, they're going to be tracking you now with the 5G stuff and all that. I said, do you have a telephone with you? I said, can I see it? They're already doing it. This has nothing to do. But hopefully,
because he's so important, the government really wants to track him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the more availability of the vaccines, the more people hopefully will vaccinate, and maybe we can get closer to that herd immunity that so eludes us.
And there's been no pandemic manual given to the governor or to us, right? So this is great that the number is going up and more will be vaccinated.
Great.
So likewise, a Biden-Harris team has said that most all Americans will be vaccinated this year. How do you feel? Do you think that's possible?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, he's what's happened in this first 2 months has been tremendous. First month since he's been in office has been tremendous. So he appears to be on track with aggressive rollout. It's good news to be hearing the news of increased capacity. That's really been the real issue. They have a lot of mediums. They're considering a lot of outlets now. Pharmacies, the Walgreens, CVS of the world are being considered now as outlets. More and more churches I've heard of and are participating
stadiums.
Right. Yeah. So it's really, they're expanding it, and it's really based on the capacity. And Gaylia, to your credit, I believe that they will probably adjust that schedule for you youngsters soon. So you'll probably benefit. The Bobby Soxers can get the vaccines soon. So
my concern, because I do think the Biden administration is doing a fabulous job. My concern are the people who don't want to be vaccinated. One of my dearest friends lives in Litchfield, Kentucky, and her husband is a physician and she's a nurse practitioner, and they know so many people. I mean, a lot of people who do not intend to get vaccinated.
But what has challenged me, I know people that have died by name from the COVID.
So do I. Right. Have members. I'm
by
sure
name.
We all have congregants. Yeah.
Ministers.
People eating in their houses.
Colleagues and family. I know people by name.
I'm having a funeral. Clay, I'm having a funeral for one such person this coming Saturday.
Right. So that is the Great Awakening for me. You know, they had the Great Awakening back in the 1800s, whatever it was. This is the Great Awakening for me. Those deaths have been a tremendous awakening for me and for many of my colleagues. So it was a strong dose of coffee that really awakened them to the need to get it whenever it's available. The risk of taking the vaccine, the risk of not taking the vaccine far outweighs the risk of taking it. Because we do know that the COVID will do some damage to you, and not to mention the long-term effects it might have, even if you get over it. So I think many have awakened to that fact.
That'll bring to a close. Clay Calloway has the final word on this edition of Moral Side of the News. I thank Rabbi Gaylia Rooks, Reverend Harriett Akins Banman, Father Tony Smith, and Clay Calloway. Thank you for watching and listening to this program. And by the way, new this year, if you want to catch this program again, just jump on YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. We'll be back again next week with another edition. Until then, be safe and stay warm.